Hello everyone and welcome back to Anomalous Archive, where we post scary stories to help you sleep. Please comment where you are listening to my videos from, since I believe it would be fun for all of us to know. Also, please don't forget to like and subscribe. So without further ado, sit back, relax and enjoy. This is the end. I can no longer hide. Soon it will take me, and, so the truth does not get lost in the depths of tangled events, I decided to write this story, a final message, if you will. I hope the people who find it can properly assess the situation and tell the world what we have faced. It all began with Kevin. It was he who, on the first Sunday of January, while exploring the far corners of the darknet, accidentally came across one game with a sinister title, Lose and You Die. My friend had plenty of ambition, and so he downloaded it to his phone without much thought, not suspecting the danger hidden behind the unique digital code. On Monday morning, I, as usual, met up with my classmates in the men's restroom. This was a kind of tradition we had before classes. We gathered, discussed pressing problems like various tests, and prepared for the routine of sitting behind desks. Kevin was also there that day, and it was clear from his face that he really wanted to tell us something. Guys, last night I found something in the darknet. You'll crack up, my friend said excitedly, pulling his phone out of his pocket. Yeah, no way. I'm not taking part in this crap anymore. The last time was enough, said one of my classmates, Nick Garrison, irritably, and immediately left the restroom. Two other guys followed his example, leaving only me, Kevin, and Dylan with Paul in the room. Looks like he really didn't enjoy that prank call to 911, I snickered, recalling the hilarious joke we played on Nick, which Kevin organized himself with the help of some viral link. To hell with him. Let him keep whining, the crybaby, Kevin said. Anyway, guys, here's the deal. He paused briefly and, making sure everyone present was focused on his story, continued with satisfaction. You all know I've been hanging out in the darknet for over a year, looking for all sorts of trash you can't find in a normal browser. Well, last night, I went a bit further than usual, and on one strange site, I found this game. My friend showed us the display of his smartphone, on which there was just one single shortcut, a black square with a white human skull inside. Below was a chilling title, Lose and You Die. What's curious, Kevin said, I couldn't find any description of this game or the developer's contacts. The site was completely empty. Honestly, I've never seen anything like it before. After Kevin's final words, the rest of us exchanged glances in silence. In my classmates' eyes, I saw genuine interest. All of them, ignoring common sense, were eager to find out as soon as possible what was hidden behind this creepy icon. Unfortunately, I was no exception, and as the most active member of our group, I was the first to break the prolonged pause. Have you already launched the game or not yet? I wanted to do it in front of you, but on one condition: you also have to download it and try to get through it, let's say, like real men. Whoever refuses is a wimp. A goofy smile spread across Kevin's face. He knew perfectly well that we guys wouldn't back down, and that made him even happier. Alright, damn you. Send the link. Just play first, or else I'll die because of you, Dylan grumbled discontentedly, then pulled out his phone. After receiving Kevin's message, he was the first to download the file. Paul and I did the same, and 5 minutes later, we watched curiously as Kevin opened our gaming marathon. From the very first seconds of launching the game, it became obvious that this masterpiece was created by some junkie or maniac who clearly had mental issues. There was nothing interesting in the menu itself, except I noticed the absence of standard buttons like exit, settings, and so on. There was only start game. But what happened next was total trash. The game resembled a typical indie horror, of which there are many on the internet. However, I noticed a few oddities almost immediately. First, the graphics were too realistic for a phone game, as if Kevin's character existed in real life, just on the other side of the screen. Second, I was surprised by the gameplay, rather, by some of its details. The player needed to walk through dark corridors of a maze and look for an exit while being hunted by some unknown creature. Entering this or that room, my friend found mutilated corpses of people. Each had its own unique number on the t-shirt, just like Kevin's character. Third, the appearance of the main character stood out. I won't say he was 100% identical to my friend, but there was still some resemblance. Both Kevin and his character had light blonde hair and a strong build. Some of you might say it was just a coincidence. I won't argue, I'll just say that details seriously worried me and made me doubt the harmlessness of this game. After a short wander, in one of the corridors, Kevin noticed a tall female figure creeping slowly toward him. The flashlight beam, unfortunately, didn't reach the figure, so my friend, for fun, decided to move closer to get a better look at this mysterious stranger. You can guess what happened next. The female figure turned out to be a demonic entity that wanted to claim the player's soul. The moment Kevin approached that creature, it lunged at him and began tearing him to pieces with its clawed paws. It was quite the sight, and the third-person view allowed for a close look and gruesome detail. In the end, immediately after the brutal scene of the murder, the phone displayed the words, "Game over," and Kevin was thrown back into the main menu. No matter what my frustrated friend did to try to pass that ridiculous level again, it was all in vain. There was no longer any start game button, and in its place was a newly appeared button, exit. Damn it! They could have at least given some explanation. How was I supposed to know that thing would pounce on me at the first encounter? Kevin growled, not taking his eyes off his phone. Don't worry about it. You messed up a bit. It happens to everyone, Paul said with a smirk, patting our upset classmate on the shoulder. Then he added, "All right, guys, that's enough playing. Let's head to class. The bell's about to ring." The moment the four of us left the restroom and were about to head to class, we heard Kevin's hoarse voice behind us. "Guys, help." Spinning around quickly, I, Dylan, and Paul saw a horrifying sight. Kevin was on his knees, clutching his throat with both hands, as if something invisible was strangling him. The awful scene lasted for about a minute. My friend wheezed, struggling to break free from the unseen grip, while we three, shocked and terrified, silently watched our classmate being slowly killed by something. Soon Kevin lost consciousness and collapsed lifelessly to the floor. What we saw jolted me out of my stupor. I rushed to my friend, desperately trying to stir him. Boo! Kevin's mocking laughter instantly wiped away the veil of fear before my eyes, and I once again saw his living, smiling face. "You mean you were faking it, you idiot?" I almost died of fright. I practically shouted, giving him a light slap. "Hey, easy. I was just kidding. Why are you so nervous?" Kevin said with a grin, getting to his feet and brushing the dust off his pants. "You know what, Nick was right. Screw you and your stupid jokes and games," Dylan said, voicing the thought all of us shared. Right after he spoke, the bell rang, so the three of us headed to class and sat down at our desks. Nothing else interesting happened that day. We wandered around school, sat in classrooms, and basically killed time, completely forgetting about Kevin's morning stunt. We also didn't really bring up the game. None of us wanted to test our nerves or get hit with sudden jump scares that made you uneasy just looking at them. And if the first day with the downloaded game on our phones passed relatively calmly, on the second day, something happened that made my hair stand on end. On Tuesday morning, when I entered the classroom, I saw my gloomy classmates sitting at their desks, whispering anxiously among themselves. I was slightly late to class and didn't know what had happened or why everyone was so upset. But I understood soon enough when I noticed Kevin's photo in a frame on the teacher's desk. It turned out that my friend, with whom I had been friends since preschool, had taken his own life the previous night, and in a very strange way. Waiting until his family was asleep, he took a kitchen knife and slit his throat from ear to ear. Then, acting as if nothing had happened, he got back into bed and pulled the covers over himself. We learned these terrifying details later from Kevin's older brother, whom I knew pretty well. After the first class, Dylan, Paul, and I met in the restroom to discuss the terrible news. The guys were so shocked that none of them dared to speak first, so I took the initiative and asked the question that most concerned me and my classmates. Guys, do you think this is all because of that game? Come on, please don't start. What game? You can scare kids with those stories, not me, Paul said angrily, sitting on the windowsill and staring at his phone. Well, I think you're on the right track, Adam, Dylan suddenly cut in, first looking at me and then at Paul. I don't want to add to the drama, but it's way too big a coincidence. Admit it. Kevin lost, and on the same evening, he killed himself. I've known him a long time, and he was always a cheerful, normal guy. This is suspicious. We paused, exchanging glances. It was clear Paul was unhappy with our speculation, and his face grew darker by the second. All right, cowards. If you don't believe me, we'll prove it all for real, our classmates said, finding the black and white shortcut on his phone and launching the game without another word. Dylan and I quickly joined him as spectators, watching the gameplay with tension. At that moment, I had a déjà vu feeling. The same dull menu with only one line appeared, and then the dark corridors that Kevin had roamed through just a day before. There was something else, though. A couple of minutes into wandering the endless maze, Paul happened to check one of the rooms and discovered a corpse. From the number on the t-shirt and the slit throat, we realized it was Kevin's character. Just like in real life, he lay on a bed with a severe wound across his neck, and everything around him, including the bedding, was soaked in blood. Clearly, this couldn't be a mere coincidence. Even Paul realized it, and he panicked, trying to find an exit. Alas, he failed. At one of the turns, he met something that lunged at him, tearing him apart. Once the game was over, my classmate didn't say a word. He just left the classroom in silence and avoided us for the rest of the day. The first strange events happened that same evening. By 9 p.m., I had finished all my homework and was about to play on my computer when I suddenly got a text message with an alarming question. Adam, hey. Can you get through to Paul? He's not answering my calls or texts. Maybe something happened to him. Crap, I don't know. I'll try calling him, I replied. After a quick search in my contacts, I dialed my classmate, but instead of hearing his voice, I got his voicemail almost immediately. Dylan, looks like he just turned off his phone. Don't worry. I think he's fine. Yeah? Well, all right. Thanks for at least picking up. My head's spinning all day because of that damn game. No problem. I get it. I'm still worried about Kevin too. Okay, I'm gonna play a bit and then sleep. We'll talk it over at school tomorrow. Good night. Yeah, you too. Putting my phone aside, I dove into my favorite computer game, gradually forgetting all my troubles. I might have sat there half the night if I hadn't suddenly been distracted by the sound of a new text message. Picking up my phone and looking at the screen, I froze in horror. Someone using Kevin's number had sent me a message, enter the game. My heart pounded in my chest, and I immediately dropped the phone. It fell to the floor with a crash. Almost at the same time, I was bombarded with more texts. It was terrifying. The phone wouldn't stop pinging, and in that moment, the only thing I could think of was throwing it out the window, which is exactly what I did. Naturally, after that, I was too rattled to play. I couldn't sleep half the night, thinking about the same question: what the hell was going on? Why was I receiving messages from the dead Kevin? And most importantly, who was behind all this? Of course, I had no answers then, nor did I know what nightmare fate had in store for me in the near future. On Wednesday morning, when I got to school, I was hit with more shocking news. The previous night, Paul had hanged himself in the bathroom with an extension cord. Before that, he locked the door and turned the hot water on full blast. By the time his parents found their son, he had literally been boiled by the steam. There was no way my classmate's death could have been an accident. Dylan and I both understood that. He was sitting at the desk next to mine, white as a sheet, his eyes filled with a primal fear. After the second class, Dylan was taken home by his parents because he started acting out. He ran around the school, yelling that a demon was after him. He even attacked a teacher once, mistaking them for some evil entity that had come for his soul. I stood by, watching this insanity and wondering what to do next. Think, Adam, think. Lose and you die. What if I just don't launch this game at all? Delete it once and for all and be done with it? Damn, I forgot. I threw my phone away yesterday. Well, good riddance. At least I won't get that stupid spa. Suddenly, a familiar alert tone came from my backpack, forcing me to look inside. Among the textbooks and notebooks, I found my own phone, which couldn't possibly be there unless someone had planted it overnight while I slept. Dark thoughts were interrupted by the bell for the next class. As everyone began returning to the room, I hurriedly went up to the teacher and asked to go to the restroom. I rushed into the nearest bathroom, locked myself in one of the stalls, and tried to delete the game, but all my attempts failed. Whenever I pressed delete, an unknown error would pop up, leaving me to wonder about its real cause. How do I get rid of you, you bastard? How many people have you claimed, and how many more will you claim if you're not stopped? I hissed through gritted teeth, still staring at my phone's screen. At that very moment, the restroom door was thrown open with a crash. Someone entered and walked slowly toward my stall, stopping right in front of it. The person stood just inches away, separated from me only by a flimsy door latched from the inside, easy to kick open with a single blow. After a few seconds, there was a gentle knock, like they were trying to lure me out. Seeing, through the small gap at the bottom, the legs of a student wearing worn pants and gray sneakers, I exhaled in relief. Hey, dude, are you blind? This stall is taken. Go find another one, I snapped. No response came. Whoever it was remained where they were, silently continuing to knock until my patience finally ran out. That's it, you jerk, you're asking for it. Just wait till I get out of here, and... I hadn't finished my threat when a disgusting, gurgling wheeze came from below. Glancing down, where the stranger's feet had been, I nearly screamed in terror. Through the small gap between the floor and the door, I saw Kevin's bloodied, smiling face. His slit throat was oozing blood that pooled in a huge puddle, spreading across the floor. Slowly crawling toward my stall, he made wheezing sounds as if he wanted to speak but couldn't. Cowering in the corner, I was ready to accept my fate when the restroom door suddenly swung open and someone else came in. It was the cleaning lady, there to mop the floors during class. The second she appeared, the demon in Kevin's likeness vanished, as if he had never been there at all, leaving nothing but a horrifying memory in its wake. After that incident, I started seeing the silhouettes of my dead friends everywhere, during lunch, in the classroom, even on the bus ride home. They never spoke, they just stood there, silently smiling and terrifying me with their presence. At first, they just appeared suddenly, as if to scare me, and I began to get used to it. But one fateful evening, everything changed drastically. That day, I got home from school much later than usual, because I decided to attend a football club to distract myself from all this supernatural madness. My parents were out at a late showing at the movie theater, so I had the apartment to myself. After dinner, I immediately sat down at the computer, not to play, but to search the internet for any information about this damn game, which, to my frustration, wasn't mentioned anywhere. Then, at midnight, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye in the hallway, as if someone had just walked past my bedroom and headed to the kitchen. Right after that, I heard a loud click, and the whole house was plunged into darkness. Shocked, I sat there for a few more seconds, then got up and walked to the hallway. At the time, it felt like my body was no longer mine. My legs carried me deeper into the dark on their own, and there was nothing I could do about it. Reaching the kitchen, I was horrified to see Kevin and Paul standing by the window. Both of them pointed to the phone on the table, where the game was already open, clearly indicating that it was now my turn. The moment I sat down and picked up my phone, those demonic creatures vanished, leaving me all alone in the apartment. Right now, I'm surrounded by darkness, lit only by the faint glow of my smartphone screen and the streetlights outside. Most of my body is paralyzed. The demon left only my arms free, apparently so I could play its deadly game. Let me say in advance for the logical ones out there, I can't call or text anyone. Why? No idea. None of the numbers go through, and messages won't send, like I'm outside the coverage area. The Wi-Fi is the same way. My phone's camera is messing up. As a result, I have only one option, to open the Notes app and write down everything that's happened to me over the last few days, then set an alarm so my parents can find my message. Right now, I'm typing these lines with tears in my eyes. I'm absolutely terrified of dying. I had so many plans, and I probably won't be able to fulfill them. But oh well. I'm going to try to pass this worthless level. Maybe, just maybe, I'll make it. My name is Ethan, or, as my friends used to call me, Infernal, before I ended up here. I was among the goths, dressed all in black and smeared my face white like some caricature of a vampire from Twilight. I listened to theater of tragedy, Lacrimosa, and hymn, which we mistakenly perceived as gothic metal. And, of course, I wandered through cemeteries and abandoned hospitals with my friends. In one word, I behaved like a typical poser. But in addition, I had another hobby. I was always interested in the topic of magic, summoning spirits, or better yet, demons. Now, looking back at the past, I laugh at myself. It reminds me of a crappy horror movie where teenagers summon the devil and then run around terrified when he comes. That partly reminds me of myself. I wish I had studied well instead of getting scattered by all kinds of nonsense, saving my time and, most importantly, my health. I also like to crawl the internet in search of similar topics. I practically devoured everything related to Gothic style, Satanism, or demons. Essentially, one could have called me an indecisive cultist rather than a goth, but at that time, I didn't understand much about any of it. I just wore black and was into who knows what. Everything changed when my friend Adam came over and told me about the dark net, this shadow internet. It turns out that everything we visit is no more than 5% of the World Wide Web, and that idea captured my mind. Together with my friend, we looked for all sorts of brutal videos in goth clubs, and a couple of times, we stumbled upon weapons and drug sales. But, of course, I was interested in various rituals and demon summonings. Typing it into the search engine, the internet spat out tens of thousands of questionable sites and videos, a club of Aleister Crowley admirers, followers of Anton LaVey. It all looked more like hobby circles than something truly secret. For several hours, we flipped through one site after another, running into either outright nonsense or gatherings of degenerates who consider themselves followers of the devil. We found an enormous number of ritual animal killings and even a couple of genuine human sacrifices. Tired of net stalking, I logged out of the computer and suggested to Brad that we go for a walk to the temple. That's what we called the abandoned Mort building where we met with other guys. On the way, we picked up some wine, definitely red. But when we arrived, we didn't meet anyone. It turned out that half an hour before we got there, a local thug named Butch showed up with his buddies and scared everyone off. Thankfully, it all went down without a fight. It's just that in our circle, apart from goths, there were emos who could only complain about life and wine without reason. I never understood why we hung out with them. But that's not the point. Having finished the wine, we went home. With nothing else to do, I decided to go back into the darknet. But this time, for the same query, the search engine gave me different results. I was a bit surprised and, to my misfortune, delighted. Needless to say, I eagerly began opening link after link until I stumbled upon a strange site done in black and bloody tones. On its background stood a door sealed with a red cross, with blood trickling down the sides, and nothing else. I clicked on it, and an information window popped up with a detailed instruction on how to enter the site. I read it and was extremely surprised. You needed to perform a specific ritual, namely, rewrite text in an unknown language, sprinkle it with blood, and send a photo of it to them. At the bottom, a blade icon shimmered invitingly, a parody of the paperclip in social media when attaching a photo or video in messages. According to the site's creators, this served as a contract with unclean forces, and if you entered into it, you became one of the chosen, or, as they wrote, a brother of the first circle of the Great Prince. I remember smirking skeptically, believing it was just another ritualistic hoax. But how wrong I was. Without much thought, I decided to rewrite the text onto a standard A4 sheet, splash it with ketchup, and take a photo. I had no desire to prick my finger for a dubious adventure, so instead of a ritual knife, I took an ordinary kitchen one. I struggled a long time copying the Latin-like scribbles. I validated the contract with the name info and added my signature. Going to the kitchen, I diluted some ketchup in a shot glass of water and, using the pastry brush my mom used for pies and cakes, sprinkled pseudoblood on the paper. I also smeared my finger with undiluted ketchup as though the blood had just begun to clot. Then, as I decided, if anyone questioned its unnatural look, I would blame the poor camera quality. Twisting around, I took the knife and phone in one hand, pointing with my ketchup-covered finger at the red drops and my signature. The most interesting part was that I signed exactly as I do in real life, or rather, I did. I aimed the camera at the contract, but it wouldn't focus. I moved in closer, but my hand was shaking, and the blurry letters jumped around. Then I thought it would look cool if I used the tip of the knife to rest against my supposedly cut finger, and at the same time, I would stop my phone from trembling. And right when I decided to do so, my phone suddenly vibrated wildly, delivering a dozen VK messages all at once. I accidentally pricked my finger with the knife. Real blood seeped through the ketchup and sprinkled the contract. In that same second, I accidentally clicked the center of the screen and took a photo. For a few seconds, I stood there dumbfounded by the strange coincidences. Then, after washing my finger and pressing on it, I looked at the picture. It turned out perfectly. Instead of a fake, it showed a genuinely blood-sprinkled contract. In my youthful stupidity, I thought it was even more fun this way. But as I later discovered, it wasn't fun at all. Connecting by cable, I uploaded the photo, and immediately, the red cross door on the screen disappeared. It swung open invitingly. I clicked on it and jumped in fright. A red demon sprang out of the doorway, opening its mouth as if swallowing the screen, or how to describe it, I'm not especially good with metaphors. The point is that I ended up on a site bristling with rituals, sacrifices, and demon summonings. Forgetting about my injured finger, I dived into the black and bloody depths of insane darkness. Some sections described how to prepare to summon Asmodeus and how to ask him properly. Another article explained who Belphegor was and what he bestows upon his followers. A third one delved into the different energies released during mass orgies or sacrifices. And there were countless photos and videos of ritual killings and black masses. The site's borders were adorned with various occult symbols, from pentacles and the sigil of Baphomet to entirely unknown signs. After feasting my eyes, I decided to continue tomorrow and close the site. But immediately, an information window popped up, preventing me from ending the session. Clicking the X several times, I got nowhere. Even scrolling the short text down and tapping read didn't close the page. Everything was turning strange, so I decided to read it. Below is an approximate translation of the text, as I don't remember it by heart. Brother, we are glad to see you in the first circle of the Great Prince, the patron of sciences, the bearer of light and true freedom. You stand on his threshold. He approaches with heavy steps, and you can see his works. You are honored to join his legion. But before you taste his flesh and blood, you must match your brothers and sisters. 1. Be polite and do not attract attention. Be secretive, deceitful, and honest only with the circle, for the prince himself favors lies, cunning, and deception. 2. Be clean and ceremonial. Filth is a privilege for the chosen and a punishment for others. It is needed only at black masses and orgies. 3. Strive for a healthy lifestyle and knowledge so that you outlive many and preserve your health. The mind and the fortress of the body are for the great prince. 4. Never, under any circumstances, speak of the circle to anyone. We have ears and eyes. Our time has come, brother, and we are building a new world. As soon as I finished reading, the window closed, and another popped up, stating, Brother, follow his rules, and he will turn his gaze to you and reward you. But since you have just joined the circle, he grants you the right to offer the first sacrifice. Give the great prince his victim, but do not kill. It's simpler. Pick someone you dislike and write their name below. Within 24 hours, that person will be dead. I tried to close the browser, but my computer wouldn't listen to me. I wish I had just yanked out the power cord and never gone back to that site or the darknet at all. I remembered that incident with Dylan Vortex, bent and typed his name. Immediately, the window closed, and with it, the site. A couple of seconds later, the computer worked and rebooted altogether. Honestly, that moment crushed me inside. I felt I had done something terribly wrong and irreversible. But blaming it on having read too many weird articles, I simply shut down the computer and went to sleep. Morning at college started off hectically. Everyone was asked to go to the assembly hall, where there were police officers. Not knowing what was happening, I asked Brad, who pulled me aside and whispered that Vortex and 3 of his friends had disappeared. That news made my soul go cold. I thought about telling my friends about last night's darknet visit, but something stopped me. They questioned us for about half an hour, asking if we knew anything or not, but no one had any information. Just when they were about to let us go, a guy from the law department ran in and announced that the thugs had been found, all except Dylan. The student was pale as a wall and clearly disturbed. When we went down to the first floor lobby, we understood everything. There stood Dylan's friends, trembling with fear and crying. Their sportswear was spattered with blood, and in that state, they no longer looked like threatening punks from the neighborhood. They looked more like terrified and misbehaving 5th graders. After a 5-minute interrogation, one of them barely mumbled that Vortex was in an abandoned shack on Elysian Fields Avenue. They had killed him. Then he dropped to his knees and burst into tears. It hit me like a sledgehammer. I realized what I had done. We all set off en masse to the shack, but they wouldn't let us inside. However, the local TV station crew walked right in, and that evening, we watched a report on the tragedy on the news. I have no idea how they managed to air that footage publicly. As far as I know, that shouldn't be allowed. And that's where I saw them for the first time. But let me focus on the frightening broadcast in more detail. By the abandoned shack stood a female reporter in a blue dress, energetically narrating about the brutal and horrifying murder of a young student by his friends. According to the detainees, they were completely sober, then a black fog seemed to consume them. They regained themselves only when Dylan Vortex was already convulsing with a crushed skull and hanging from the ceiling. But the most horrifying shot came next. The blonde journalist stepped over some debris and walked past the police toward the scene of the murder, climbed the second floor, and opened a creaking wooden door. She entered the room, and I saw what haunts me in my nightmares. From the ceiling, on a thick rope tied to a light fixture, hung the corpse of Dylan. Below his feet, a huge pool of blood had formed. But he wasn't strangled. His head had been pierced with a metal rod through his ears. Then, after fitting the ends of the rods into some bracket, they tied the body to the rope and hung it from the lamp. The most chilling part was that right by his feet sat a small white kitten, smeared in blood. It was playing with the dead man's shoelaces. The reporter went on, saying the students repented and would be sent for a forensic psychological exam. Then they showed Dylan's mother in tears. She talked about what good and kind son she had, how he simply grew up in a criminal neighborhood and tough living conditions but acted differently at home, loved animals dearly, and helped people. His friends said he planned to take that kitten home. Next followed interviews with neighbors, all speaking of Dylan in a positive light. I felt a heaviness inside. I had written the name of someone who was, in essence, innocent. The shot returned to Dylan's corpse again. The journalist said something, and I stood there stunned, emptiness filling me as I watched the white kitten, sitting in the puddle of blood, play with the shoelaces of the dead man. But when the camera shifted its focus to the woman, for a brief moment, a black haze appeared behind her. That was the first time I saw them. It wasn't even 9 p.m. when I went to bed. I felt so disgusted and empty inside that I wanted to hide under the covers and howl in tears. I perfectly understood who was really responsible for his death. And I was scared. I decided never to visit that site again. Tormented by guilt, I didn't notice how I fell asleep. That night, I was plagued by nightmares. I saw that blood-smeared, blue-eyed kitten playing with the white shoelaces on the sneakers. In my dream, Dylan's body swayed, and his eyes looked at me with hatred. I also dreamed that I was riding a coffin-shaped skateboard along the inner side of a gigantic, protruding eye. I don't know how to describe it accurately so you understand me, dear reader. I was going back and forth on the board like on a playground, but that playground was someone's colossal eyeball inside a skull. At the same time, I saw from the side how the blue iris of that huge eye shifted. I woke up at 3 in the morning from terrible pain in my eyes, as if they were about to burst. And just then, a message arrived on VK. Barely managing to glance at the screen, I was so terrified that my hands trembled. From an unknown contact came this text: "Brother, go to the site and pick the next center." I threw my phone aside onto a chair, and immediately it felt like I got hammered in the head. I even cried out in pain. Gulping down pills, I tried to sleep again. With difficulty, but I did, and the nightmares continued. Everything was drenched in blood. The dream had no clear structure, just screams, moans, and wails. Scene after scene replaced one another. I saw some vile orgies of who knows whom with whom, ritual sacrifices where people in black robes hacked naked captives into pieces with cleavers, and I saw completely black, bodiless figures with long horns. So it went until morning. When I woke, still suffering from pain in my eyes, I found a new message on my phone: "Brother, if you continue to turn away from the faith, you will go blind. Pick a sinner." And again, I proved to be a total cowardly weakling. I went into the dark net, back onto that accursed site, and forcing myself, typed the name of the teacher I hated the most. Rumor had it he cheated on his wife, gave passing grades for bribes, and overall had a pompous attitude. He constantly got on everyone's nerves and considered his subject, occupational safety, more important than all the others. He said that safety regulations are written in blood and that we must know them like the Lord's Prayer, as if anyone of our generation does. I know it now because of the circumstances. I remember typing that he pestered us and should get what he deserved, trying to justify myself. As far as I knew, nobody liked him. Yet, once again, I was gravely mistaken. The instant I sent the message, the pain vanished. When I arrived at college, I was shocked by the schedule change. Instead of philosophy, we had occupational safety. Panic surged in me, and I barely restrained myself from running away. Brad asked if I was okay, and I just brushed him off, saying I slept poorly. In class, everything was normal for about 10 minutes until Mr. Arthur suddenly changed expression. A glassy veil clouded his eyes. He stood up, grinning, and walked over to a stand with tools. Everyone started exchanging glances. The students nearest him got up quietly, unsure what to expect. The teacher took a hammer, unhurriedly returned to his desk, and for a long minute simply stared at the wall, smirking oddly. Then, looking over the classroom and mumbling something incomprehensible, he began to beat himself on the head with the hammer. The class erupted in screams, and some ran for help. Nobody tried to take the tool from him. Everyone was just scared. The dull blows echoed through the room. Mr. Arthur, occasionally screaming in pain, kept bashing in his own skull with the hammer, crying and smiling at the same time. By all the laws of nature, he should have passed out or collapsed long ago. But he kept striking, over and over. When he had smashed open his skull, he started eating his own brain. I simply couldn't believe my eyes, nor could anyone else. This just doesn't happen. But it did. He scooped out chunks of his brain with his fingers and shoved them into his mouth, trembling and sobbing. Several times, his eyes rolled back, and he convulsed. Then he fell down, and we thought it was over. But in a few seconds, the teacher, bloody and unsteady, would rise again. Bracing against the table with his hands, he continued devouring his brain. And, as luck would have it, help was slow to arrive. Only at the tail end of this nightmare did he let out a bitter laugh. Stretching his face into a stupid grin, he mumbled, like pistachio ice cream, and collapsed in death, splattering everyone with blood and cerebrospinal fluid. Mr. Arthur didn't even convulse. He just fell onto the table and died. The moment he did, our homeroom teacher and the school director burst into the classroom. They screamed in unison along with the students. After that day, half of our group wound up on sick leave with nervous breakdowns, and 4 girls ended up in psychiatric hospitals. As macabre as it sounds, he was figuratively drilling our brains, and literally his own. Forgive me if I forgot to mention one not insignificant detail. Before Mr. Arthur stood up and went for the hammer, a black haze appeared behind him, seemingly stretching out its tentacles and wrapping around his head. For some reason, only I could see it. But, as with the first case, everything eventually came to light. Mr. Arthur turned out to be a model family man and a good father. He wasn't harassing us. He was trying to give us necessary knowledge. He was just a demanding teacher, devoted to his work and worrying about his students. I couldn't bring myself to go to his funeral. To be honest, I got drunk on vodka for the first time and cried at home for a long time, locked in my room. After all, because of me, and only me, another innocent person had died. And when I was thoroughly drunk, I logged into the darknet and visited that site. In response to their offer to choose the next victim, I typed that I didn't want to participate in this anymore. I wrote that they could kill me or torture me with pain, but I would never again give them a single name. There was a long silence from their side, and then a message appeared right on the site. Very well, brother. We release you. You have proven unworthy of the protection of the one whom the legions of the free revere. You shall know neither his flesh nor his blood. But we will take something of yours, something we see fit. And at that moment, I was kicked out of the site, and once again, the door with the red cross was there, as at the very beginning. From the next morning on, people started following me, excessively pale people. They glowered silently at my every step, and behind them loomed a black haze. I went to the police station, where they sent me to the district officer. But as soon as I crossed the threshold of his office, I froze in shock. Behind the back of the serious, smirking major stood not just a haze, but a figure formed of that black smoke, sporting long horns. I tried to leave, but the policeman stopped me. He twitched unnaturally, then sneered at me with open contempt. When will you give us what we need, so you can go on living? Got it, apostate. Now get out. I bolted out of the station. At the checkpoint, nobody even asked for my pass. I glanced at the female officer at the post, and behind her stood the same horned black silhouette. But they were in no hurry to take me. They tormented me. And I began to see how, through grief and suffering, they materialize in our world. First, a gray haze starts to flow in. Then it darkens, becomes denser, and in the final phase, it takes shape into a horned creature from the gloom, which then disappears into the woods, the city, or the crowd. I first observed the whole process when a drunk driver crashed into a bus stop and killed a man. The longer the man's wife cried over his body, the more haze seeped into our world. Then one of those creatures appeared and, after glancing first at me and then at the drunk driver, disappeared around the corner. I got the impression that the killer saw it too, since he was following it with his eyes. A month later, they finally came for what they needed. It had rained that day, and I hurried to catch the streetcar. By then, I looked more like a hunted animal than a young guy. I had stopped wearing black or listening to gothic metal. I no longer enjoyed any of that. As I stepped onto the streetcar, I slipped, and my arm landed on the rail. Without waiting for me to stand up, the driver slammed the door shut and moved forward. My left hand got cut off. Screaming in pain, I looked at the departing streetcar. Behind the back of the female conductor stood a horned figure of smoke. People surrounded me, trying to help, but when I raised my eyes, it was those same pale individuals who had been trailing me. One of them leaned in and, taking out a knife, swiftly cut off my right ear. "This way, you'll hear us better, brother apostate," he hissed through his teeth. Then those pale people hurried away somewhere with my ear. They also took my severed hand. Indeed, every one of them had that horned creature hovering behind. I noticed that only they, those with these entities behind them, offered any sort of help. Ordinary people didn't even see me. After the regular hospital, I voluntarily came to a psychiatric clinic. It's easier for me here, especially after the prescribed medications. Under these pills, I don't hear their voices as much, just a faint whisper. They say they will rule the world soon, and I have no doubt about that. Their numbers grow every day. If you think I'm paranoid, just remember how many people commit inexplicably terrible acts. The 4 horsemen have been riding around the world for years, and the planet is drowning in blood. That's all they need. Many people, succumbing to their influence, change not only internally but externally. Their facial features become sharper, their gaze heavier, more malicious, and even their smell changes, growing somehow denser with a faint reek of rotten eggs. The concentration of evil in the world is exceeding the good day by day. As a result, everyone will lose their minds, and then we will die.